Begin today the Gemara on Daf Zayin Amud Beis, the last two lines of the Amud Chatos Min Olam. The Gemara here goes back to the halacha that it said in the Mishnah that if you bring a carbon chatos and it's brought with a kavana shaloi lishma in one of the four avodas, which is either the shchita or kabbalah, receiving of the blood, or the halacha, which is bringing the blood to the mizbeach, or the zrika of the dam, spraying the blood on the mizbeach, then regarding a carbon chatos and a pesach as well, it'll invalidate the carbon completely. They are the Pesach and the Chatas are the two exceptions that invalidate the carbon completely. So before this, the Gemara brought the source for the carbon Pesach, and here it brings the source for the Chatas for this. So the Gemara Chatas Min Olam. Where do we see that by Chatas it invalidates the carbon completely? By the carbon Chatas, the pasuk says V'shochat oisa lachatas, that you shecht it for a Chatas. Shetei shchita l'shem Chatas, that the shchita has to be done l'shma for the chatas. So that's regarding shchita. Now ashkechon shchita. So the pasuk is speaking about shechting it for chatas. Kabbalah min olam. From where do I know that when I receive the blood, it also has to be done l'shma? Because the pasuk goes on to say, v'lokach hakayin. This is in the next pasuk, right after it says shchita. It says v'lokach hakayin midam chatas. He takes from the blood of the chatas. So what does the velokach mean? Because it says it in the pasuk right after the shchita. So this is referring to receiving the blood, and therefore it says midam hachatas. It doesn't just say midomai. That means shetehei kabbalah l'shem chatas. You receive the blood, has to be l'shma for the purpose of the chatas. Now v'ashkecha and shchita v'kabbalah. So I have a source that the shchita and the kabbalah sadam of the chatas must be l'shma. Zrika min olam. From where do I see that the spraying of the blood also has to be l'shma? The Gemara does not bring, not here, not in the continuation, a separate source that the halacha, that bringing the blood to the mizbeach has to be done l'shma, because we already had before in the Gemara, Rashi brings here, before in the Gemara on Daf Dalet it said that halacha and Kabbalah are compared to each other, because the pasuk uses a term regarding the halacha of the blood, using the term of the hakrava, which is the Kabbalah of the blood. The Gemara before said that those two are compared. Okay, so therefore the Gemara goes straight to the zrika, the spraying of the blood on the mizbeach. How do I know by the chatos that it has to be l'shma? The Makra, the pasuk says, "V'chiper olav hakayin mechatasai," and the kayin will atone for him from his aveda, from mechatasai. So from this we learn out shetehei kapara l'shem chatos, that the kapara that's done has to be mechatasai. It has to be l'shma for this carbon chatos. So we have the source regarding the carbon chatas for all the avodas that has to be done l'shma. Ashkechon sheni kodesh. So I have the source for all of the avodas regarding sheni kodesh, which means that you may not have a kavana shaloi l'shma to think of a different carbon than this carbon chatas. Shinui bailim min olam, the other halacha of shaloi l'shma, when the kohen is thinking that he's bringing this kapara, this chatas that is, as a kapara for a different owner. How do we know that that will invalidate the carbon as well? And this also, we have to have the source for all of the four Avedis. On Makra, because the pasuk here says, the pasuk we just quoted, V'chiper olav hakayin, so it says olav, v'lo el chaveirei, that he has to be thinking that it's for him and not for someone else. So that's the source that has to be done l'shma. Okay, but we're still not done because there's more details to learn out here as the Gemara now explains. So ashkechon lemitzveh. I see over here the source for these psukim that there has to be a kavanah l'shma for the mitzvah, which means l'chatchila has to be done l'shma. But la'akiv min olam, from where do I know that that it's a must, and that if not, the whole carbon will not be valid at all? Which is really what we're looking for over here, to say that chatos is different than all other karbanos, that also chatchila must be done l'shma, but b'di'evet, if it was done shaloi l'shma, the carbon is still kosher. So where do I know that chatos is different and it's ma'akiv? Says the Gemara, we can learn this from what Ravuna Bereid Rav Yeshua says later here in the Gemara, that the pasuk says the word chatos, rather the pasuk could have said the word chatos, and instead it uses the word chatasai. That's what he darshans. This is from a pasuk that he darshans, that it says by a nazir. So just like he darshans this regarding the pasuk by a nazir, where it says chatasai instead of chatos, a hachanami. So here as well we can darshan this word chatos. It could have said the word chatos, and it says instead chatasai, the pasuk that we just quoted before. The word, it says chatasai.
Which was this?
So it could have said mechatos. No, there's the first pasuk the Gemara is bringing is by nazir. We'll see soon. The Gemara will bring the pasuk, but now the Gemara is saying that over here by a regular karban chatos, it also says the term chatasai instead of chatas, and therefore we know that this is an additional drasha, extra vav of chatasai is coming to say that it's ma'akiv. That it's not just a mitzvah l'chatchila for l'shma, but it's ma'akiv, that it must be done l'shma, and if not, it's going to invalidate the whole carbon. Okay, but the Gemara now says, Ashkechon mitzvah b'shini kodesh. I see that that it has to be l'chatchila, but regarding shini kodesh, that it's has to be done l'shma, right? And also the zrike b'shini bailim. And regarding the Shini Kaidesh, this drasha that the Gemara just brought, Chatasai, is actually not a drasha for Shini Kaidesh. Because what's the word Chatasai mean? Chatasai means it has to be his. So this is actually a second pasuk besides the word Allah. There's the word Allah that says that you have to have kavanah for the bailim. And also Chatasai saying it has to be his. So only regarding the Shini Bailim do I have two psukim that teaches me that it's ma'akiv, that it must be done l'shman, if not it won't be valid. Okay, so therefore the Gemara continues and asks, so Ashkecha mitzvah b'Shini Kodesh. I still only know regarding the halacha of Shalei Lishmar and Shini Kodesh, that I only know l'chatchila, the mitzvah. Uzrike b'shini bailim, and I have over here the source regarding zrike, which is what the pasuk is talking about. V'chipper Allah, v'chipper is the zrike. So regarding the zrike, that if you have the kavanah of shini bailim, bein mitzvah, bein la'akiv. So I see over here that both that it has to be l'chatchila and also it's ma'akiv, that it must be done for this bailim and not for someone else. But we still don't have a source for everything else. And that is la'akiv b'chol avodas b'shini kodesh, to tell you regarding the kavanah of shalei lishma for shini kodesh, that it's a must, that it's ma'akiv. What's the source for that? And also regarding shini bailim, ubishar avodas b'shini bailim, and for the other avodas of the carbon, when it comes to this kavanah shalei lishma, for thinking for another person, bein lemitzvah and bein la'akiv, that it's not only l'chatchila, but that it's also ma'akiv. Minalon. From where do I know this? Because again, in the pasuk v'chipper olav, you have regarding shini bailim only a source for the zrike. That's what v'chipper means. So how do I know that it will be ma'akiv by the other avedis as well? Amar Rabbi Yoina. So Rabbi Yoina says, Asya mechatas nazir. I learned this out from the chatos by the nazir, the chsiv, by the nazir that brings a chatis. He actually brings a oila and a chatos, and there the pasuk says v'hikriv akayin lefnei Hashem. Va'asa es chatasev es oilasai, and he does his chatas and his oila. What does va'asa es chatasai mean? Sheyu kol asiyasav l'shem chatas. From here we learn out that all of the asiyas has to be done l'shem chatas. So this is the second drasha. We already know that all of the things, all of the avedis of the chatas have to be done l'shma. So here when it says again that all of the avedis by the chatas nazir has to be done l'shma, so that teaches me a second time. So it tells me that it's ma'akiv, that it's not just a mitzvah l'chatchila, but it's a must. That's the source regarding shini kodesh, that if you have the kavanah shalei lishma by any of the avodas, because it says the lashon va'asa. Va'asa means any asiyah, any of the avodas that's done for the chatas, it's going to be possible. So ashkechon shini kodesh. Okay, so now I have the source for shini kodesh by all of the avodas, that if it's done shalei lishma, it's going to be possible. However, shini bailim in I still don't have the source for shini bailim. We only have the source regarding the zrike, the pasuk v'chippeh, talking about the zrike, that there it must be done for this owner and not for someone else. But how do I know regarding the other avedis of shini bailim that it can't be done shalei lishma? Amar Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua. So Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua says chatos chatasai. Over here by the nazir, when it says va'asa es chatasai v'esay lasai. So it's it could have said chatas. It says chatasai. So that because it says chatasai, so also regarding shini bailim, I have an extra pasuk saying that the zrike must be done lishma, and it's ma'akiv. It's ma'akiv. So that's where I learned it out from. Okay, this is really the Gemara brought this before. This is here. This is the pasuk, the second pasuk where it says it by the nazir. And Rashi explains that I see over here that it's ma'akiv for shini bailim by the zrike. But from that I learn out that the same applies to the other avedis as well. Rashi here says, the Gemara before, Adav Zayin said that you compare to the karban shlamim. Just like by karban shlamim, you see that all the avodas are the same. The mitzvah of Lishma regarding all the avodas are the same. So over here, once we know, b'negeya to the shini bailim of the zrike, that it must be done Lishma, and if it's not, it's ma'akiv, it'll passel completely. So then I learn out the same thing applies to the other avodas as well, that it's ma'akiv and it must be done Lishma. That's how Rashi teaches this. Okay, but the point is, we learned it out from the pasuk that it says by the Nazir, that va'asa eschatosai ve'esai lasai. Yeah. So now the Gemara asks on this, Maskef lo Ravina. Ravina asks on this drasha. You're learning out from chatosai, because it says his chatos, it's an extra drasha. So Ravina asks, how could you darshan this? If so, elamayata oilas, the pasuk could have said that you should make the oilas of the Nazir, and it says oilasoi, his oila. My darshis pay. What are you going to darshan here? Are you going to darshan by the carbon oila the same thing? That we have an extra drasha here to say for the carbon oila, that if you have a wrong kavan of shinui bailim, then it's going to be ma'akiv, and it's going to passel the whole carbon. But we said that only a chatas is an exception for this concept, that it passes the whole carbon. We don't say this by an oila. So if so, what are you going to darshan by the word oila soy with that extra vav there? That was Ravina's question. Now the Gemara goes on to say, now according to what Ravina is asking, ask this question regarding the other lashonis that it says in the pasuk. Well, Ravina, according to Ravina, over there by the carbon of the Nazir, it could have said minchas, and instead it says minchasoi. It says there in the next pasuk, v'asa hakainis minchasoi ves niskai. And the same thing regarding the nesech, the wine that's poured in the mizbeach. It could have said nesech, and instead it says niskai. If you're telling me that whenever it says that extra vav at the end of the word, it has to be darshan, so then my darshis pohu. What are you going to darshan with the word minchasai and niskai? It's not only a question of the word oilasai. But the Gemara says, no, Ravina did not ask from there. Because ahu, when it says the extra vav by minchasai and niskai, we know what we darshan from there. Because ahu mi bayale, what we darshan from there is similar to a drasha that we darshan regarding another pasuk, and that is minchasam v'niskayem. This is the lashon of the pasuk that it says by actually the karbanos that are brought on sukkahs. So it says the lashon minchasam v'niskayem. It doesn't say mincha, it doesn't say nesach. It says minchasam v'niskayem. What is it coming to teach? That balayla you can bring the carbon by night. So minchasam v'niskayem, and then when it says minchasam v'niskayem, afilu lemachar. Not only could you bring it at night, you could even bring it the next day. Which means even though the carbon mincha and the nesach that's brought with the karbanis of sukkahs is really to be brought together with the carbon by day, at the same time when you're bringing those karbanis. But nevertheless, because it says minchasam v'niskayem, you darsha from here that it can be brought even by night, and it could even actually be brought the next day. Even though it's being brought in a different time period, it'll still count as a carbon being brought for the karbanis of the yontif. That's what you darshan from that. So over here as well, when it says minchasai v'niskai, we darshan from this to say that even though this mincha and the nesach that's brought for the carbon of the nazir should be brought at the same time, but even if you brought it at night or the next day, it's going to work. It's going to be good enough. So therefore, we know what we darshan from that. But ella oilas oilasai my darshis bohu or darshis bay. What are you going to darshan from this extra vav of the word oilasai? If you say you darshan from chatasai, so then what are you going to darshan from this? It's one question. But now the Gemara asks a more fundamental question. B'chlal, mi gamri me hadadi. You're bringing me a source to have an extra pasuk that the shinui bailim is going to be ma'akiv and it's going to invalidate every carbon chatas from where? From the chatas by the nazir. So how could you learn out every chatas from the chatas of the nazir? Chatas chaylev me chatas nazir legamra. You can't compare the two. Chatas chaylev, the Gemara uses always the example of when a person eats forbidden fats. That's the regular chatas. So how could you compare that to the chatas of a nazir? Why not? Sheken yesh ima damim acherim. The carbon chatas of a nazir is more stringent because you see that he doesn't only bring a chatas, he brings an oila as well. A regular carbon chatas is just a chatas. So how could you compare and learn out from there this halacha of lishma? And the Gemara actually says you also can't learn out to the opposite as well. Chatas nazir mechatas chaylev loy gamra. You can't learn out the chatas of a nazir from the regular chatas. Why? Sheken kares. Because a regular carbon chatas is brought in an aveda, like eating forbidden fats, or any other aveda where there's a chiyuv of kares. By nazir, there's no chiyuv kares involved in this that he's bringing the carbon chatas. So you can't learn out from there at all. So the Gemara says, okay, you're right. So we can't learn out from the carbon of the nazir. Ella Omar Rava, so therefore Rava says, Astya mechatas mitzayra. the extra pasuk where we see that it says a double, again, another lashon that it must be done l'shma by a chatos. Where is this? From the chatos of a mitzayra. The pasuk says, "V'asa hakayin es chatos sheyiu kol asiyasav l'shem chatos." That all the asiyas of the carbon should be done for the purpose of a chatos. So from here, this is the second time the Torah is saying this regarding a carbon chatos. So I learn from here that the kavan of shaloi l'shma is ma'akiv. Says the Gemara of Ashkecha and Shini Kodesh. This is a second pasuk that tells me that you can't do shaloi l'shma if you're thinking a different machshava regarding what carbon it is. Shini baile minale. How do I know if the exchange of the person of the kain's machshava is for the owner that he's bringing the carbon for? How do you know that that is also a problem that will invalidate the entire carbon? On Makra, I learned it out from that pasuk as well by the chatas of the mitzayre. Pasuk goes out there and says, "V'chiper al hamit tahir," that he should spray the blood that should be a kapara specifically for the one that he's making pure. This mitzayre, al hamitar zeh v'loy al hamitar chaveirei. Only if he's thinking that he's doing it for this mitzayre and not if he's thinking that he's doing it for someone else. So we learn it from the chatas of a mitzayre. But the Gemara asks on this as well. How could you learn out a regular carbon chatas from the chatas of a mitzayre? Again, chatas chaylev, chatas mitzayre. How could you compare? Lo yalfi, you can't learn them out. Shekein yesh imo domem acherim. By the chatas of the mitzayre. Again, chatas chaylev, mechatas mitzayre leyalfa. You can't learn out the chatas of the chaylev from the chatas of the mitzayre because you can't yeshima dam acherim. By the chatas of the mitzayre, he also brings a second carbon. It's not just the carbon chatas, similar to the nazir. He brings also a carbon oila together with this. So therefore, you can't learn out from the chatas of the mitzayre. And also the reverse, chatas mitzayre mechatas chaylev legamra. You can't learn out the chatas of the mitzayre from the chatas of the chaylev. Like we said before, the same svara. Shekain kares. Because a regular carbon is brought for an aveda that's kares. By a mitzayre, there's no kares involved. So I can't learn out a regular carbon chatos, not from the chatos of a nazir, and not from the chatos from a mitzayre. So the Gemara says, Michada lo yasir. From one of them, I can't compare. Teisi chada mitarti. So if so, I would argue and say, let's learn out one from maybe two of them together. From a tzad hashav, if I can learn from two of them together, then I'll have a source. Says the Gemara, Bahai. Which one are you going to learn out from? Which one are you going to say that the Torah should not write, and I'm going to learn out from another two? If you're going to argue and say, it's not necessary for the Torah to write that it has to be done l'shma by a regular chatas, and learn out from the chatas of a nazir and the chatas of the mitzayre together. But you can't because they actually share a certain chumrah that the regular chatas does not have. The pircha that we had is the same pircha. They both have the same chumrah that they don't come themselves. It's together with another carbon. If you'll argue and say, Lo licht v'rachmana b'chatas nazir, the Torah does not have to write this halacha regarding the chatas of the nazir v'teisim mahanach and learn out from the regular chatas chaylev and the chatas of the mitzayre, but they also share a certain chumrah. Both of these, by both of them, there's no concept of asking to be mevatel your obligation to bring this carbon. Right? By a regular carbon chatas and by a mitzayre, you must bring the carbon. By a nazir, he can be shoyel on his whole naziris to undo his naziris, and he won't have to bring this carbon. So they share a chumrah. Now, if you say lo lichta rachmana b'chatas mitzayre, the Torah should not write the chatas mitzayre and v'teisei mahanach, and I should learn out the chatas mitzayre of the other two, of the regular chatas chaylev and the chatas nazir, so that you also can't. They also share a chumrah. Ma'alahanach shekain ein boim bedalus. Both the regular chatas and the chatas of a nazir, there is no difference if the person is rich or poor. You bring the same carbon. By the mitzayre, though, the pasuk says if he's poor, he brings birds. He brings a different carbon. So therefore, there's a certain leniency there that you don't have by these two chatos. So, b'kitzur, you cannot learn out a tzad hashava here either. So therefore, we're stuck with our question that we only have one pasuk that it says by a chatos that it has to be done l'shma. We don't have a second pasuk. So how do I know that it's ma'akiv, that a chatos, if you think the kavanah of shaloi l'shma, that it'll invalidate the entire carbon? Says the Gemara, Ella, the answer is, Makra, the pasuk says regarding a chatos, and here the Gemara brings the drasha that it brought already a few times before. The pasuk goes on to say, it mentions in this pasuk right after that, lachatos, laosham, and so on. So what do I see here? We compare the chatos to the shlamim. Ma shlomim bein shini kodesh bein shini bailim. Be'inon, you can't change your kavanah, not for shini kodesh, not for shini bailim, and that's the mitzvah, that's l'chatchila. So for that we already had the source before regarding a shlomim, and regarding all karbanis that it must be done lishma, from shlomim we compare it to all karbanis. So we say the same thing applies to the chatos. Av chatos bein shini kodesh bein shini bailim be'inon lishma. When there's a shini kodesh or shini bailim, it must be done lishma. So this is all the mitzvah. That's how I know the chatchila regarding the karban chatas that it must be done l'shma. It's learned like all other karbanis in this pasuk where it says it by the shlomim. So hilkach mitzvah mishlomim. So I have the source already over here that it must be done l'chatchila l'shma from the karban shlomim. So v'hanach kroi, the other psukim that we brought before la'akev, they are actually the second pasuk. So the pasuk that it says all these psukim is already the second pasuk to say that it's ma'akiv. Rashi actually points out that the Gemara knows of this drasha that it just brought here. It already brought this drasha before. The Gemara is going through the whole shakal v'tayr. The Gemara tried to bring a source by the chatas itself without this hekish. But it shows you how there is no source you can learn out from chatas itself, and therefore you have to come back to this hekish. And therefore it comes out that the psukim over here that we brought in the beginning is already the second drasha, and therefore we know that it's ma'akiv. So we have the source regarding the chatas of regular karban chatas for forbidden fats because of the pasuk that we just brought, and then the second pasuk that we brought in the beginning of the whole sugya today, where it says v'shachat oisal chatas. That's talking about a regular chatas. So we know now by a regular chatas it has to be done l'shma and it's ma'akiv. However, there's other kinds of chatos as well. And our Mishnah that said that a chatas, the kavanah shalei l'shma, will be possible, it's any kind of chatas. So there's other kinds of chatos as well, as the Gemara here says. Chatas d'avedis kechavim, the chatas of avedis zareh, and also the shmiyas hakel, a chatas that's brought for one that hears the voice of an aid that says a false testimony. That's what it's talking about. Ubitis v'sayim, or someone that says a false shvuah. That's what bitis v'sayim refers to. And also v'tumas mikdash v'kadashov, someone that walks into the Beis HaMikdash or eats from kachim when he's tamei. The lo iksiv buhu. Here it does not say a second lashon of telling you that you have to have the chatas l'shma. Saminalan. How will I know by these kinds of chatos as well that it's ma'akiv, and if you don't have the kavanah l'shma, it'll be totally possible. Says the Gemara, the avedis kechavim, the first that we just mentioned, avedis zareh, where there's a separate parsha in the Torah for avedis zareh, but I compare that to a regular chatas. Asya mechatas chaylev. I learned it from the regular chatas. Why? Sheken kares kamaisa. Because for avedis zareh, you're bringing a carbon on something which is chayiv kares, just like a regular chatas for forbidden fats or any other cases of kares, and therefore I can compare that the same halacha applies. But the other ones that we just mentioned here, where are they learned out from? Says the Gemara, Asyan b'meh hatzad. We learn it out with hatzad hashave because we don't only have a source for a regular karban chatas that it must be done l'shma. The Gemara brought before you have the regular karban chatas. You also have the chatas of a nazir, where it's at a second time chatasai, and you also have the chatas of the mitzayre, where it says chatasai. So we do have a source for three kinds of chatos that it must be done l'shma. So these other chatos that we are bringing here, which is the shmiyas koil, bitis v'sayim, tumas mikdash v'kadashav, what's unique about all these three is they're also a chatas, but they are a chatas of oila v'yored. By them, it depends if the person is rich or poor. Where are they learned out from that it must be done l'shma? It's learned out from all these three together. From atzad hashave that we see by chatas chaylev, chatas nazir, and chatas mitzayra. All three of them together, I learn out that just like by them, it's a chatas and it must be l'shma. So too by these other cases of chatos, it also must be done l'shma. And Rashi here says you must learn this out dafka from all three together. Because if you're going to want to learn out only from two of them, it's not going to work. Rashi explains this. Because if you want to learn out from just chatas chaylev and chatas mitzayre, they have a unique stringency that you don't find by the other chatos that we spoke about over here. Because by these two, einon b'she'ela, the percha the Gemara brought before, you can't be shayel on them. We're trying to learn out to the case of a shvuah. When one swore over there by a shvuah, there is inyan of she'ela. Okay, so the same thing also, Rashi says you can't learn out from chatas chaylev and chatas nazir because by both of them there is no concept of a dal, of a pour that you bring a different carbon. And by the ones that we're trying to learn out too, there is. So therefore you have to learn a dafka from all three together, to these that we're bringing here regarding the carbon of Oila v'Yored, that they also have the same halacha that chatos must be l'shma, and if not, it invalidates the entire carbon. Okay, this is the conclusion of the source for chatos. Now the Gemara goes back to carbon Pesach. Tan Rabbanon, we learned in the Braisa, Pesach, so the carbon Pesach bismanai, when it's brought in its right time, which is that of Pesach, and has to be after Chatzais. L'shmai, so then if it's brought l'shma, so then it's kosher. Shalai l'shmai, if it's brought with not l'shma, so then pasul. It's completely pasul. Invalidates the whole carbon. The Gemara brought the source for this already on Dav Zayin Amud Beis. However, here's the chiddush: Ubishar Yemais Hashana, if you bring the carbon Pesach in any other time in the year, and that includes also on Erev Pesach, as long as it's before Chatzai, so it's not Ben Arbayim. So then, if it's brought l'shmoi, if you're going to bring it as a Pesach, l'shem a Pesach, then pasul. Then actually it's going to be pasul. Shaloi l'shmoi, but if it's brought in any other time of the year, shaloi l'shma, then kosher. Then actually it will be kosher. That's the chiddush regarding a carbon Pesach. The Gemara already mentioned this before. A carbon Pesach that's brought in any other time of the year, it becomes a shlomim. And therefore, if you bring it shaloi l'shma, it's going to be kosher. Because the halacha of a shlomim is like all other karbanis, that the shaloi l'shma, the carbon is still kosher.
What does it mean you bring the Pesach of Shalai L'Shma? What does that mean?
The rest of the year. If you brought the Pesach the rest of the year, l'shem another carbon, l'shem shlamim, l'shem ayla, l'shem chatas, l'shem asham, l'shem any other carbon, the rest of the year, that carbon will count as a shlamim and it'll be kosher.
It's not trying to say it's a Pesach.
True. Yeah, but you may think that if you bring a Pesach the rest of the year, it's nothing. What you did is worthless. So there's two chidushim here. The first chidush is the fact that the rest of the year the Pesach becomes a shlamim. That's number one. And number two, now that it is a shlamim, the halachas that applies by shlamim will apply to it. That even if you had a kavanah shaloi l'shma, let's say you brought it l'shem ayla, it'll be a shlamim, and you can continue bringing the carbon itself will be kosher. That's the second chidush here. The Gemara brings a siman there for the names of the Amiroim that are going to speak about this inyan. Shaloi, Kavitzan, Memair, Batzo, Bo, Siman. Okay, there's a long discussion over here about this inyan regarding this carbon Pesach. So what's the source of this concept that in the rest of the year you bring the carbon Pesach, Shaloi, Shema, it'll be kosher? Omar Avur the Shmuel, the father Shmuel says, Omar Kra, the pasuk says, and this is the pasuk actually by a regular carbon shlamim. So the parasha begins and says, "V'im minatzayin karbonai." If you're bringing from the tzayin, from sheep, your carbon, lezevach shlamim, lashem. It's a zevach shlamim for the Eibishter. What do we learn from here? Davar haba minatzayin. That this pasuk is actually not speaking about a regular carbon shlamim. It's speaking about a carbon that could only be brought from sheep. Which is the carbon that could only be brought from sheep? That's actually a carbon Pesach, because the carbon Pesach could only be brought from small animals, either from a lamb or a goat. So the carbon that's coming only from tzayin, yehei lezevach shlamim. That's a carbon should be that it should be for a shlamim. When will it be for a shlamim? If you bring it on any day of the year. I mean, obviously, if it's brought in the right time on Erev Pesach after Chatzais, it's not going to be a shlamim. Then it's a carbon Pesach. What the pasuk here is saying is, if you're bringing from tzayin that would have been a carbon Pesach, but you're bringing it on every day, it's going to be a shlamim. That's what this pasuk is saying. And Rashi says that this is the Gemara's understanding that this is the simple pshat of the pasuk. V'im, if you bring tzayin of Pesach, then on any day it'll be a zevach hashlamim. Okay, but the question of this is, Eimish Lamim in Midi Achrin Eloi. But I should say that this doesn't mean that if you shechts it l'shem any carbon, it should be kosher. I would still say that if you shechted it l'shem a shlamim, then it should be kosher. But what's if you shechted this carbon Pesach on any day of the year, l'shem ha'oila? Then it should be pasul. But in the Braisa it says that if you shecht a carbon Pesach any time of the year, l'shem any carbon, it's going to be kosher. So how do you know that? Here in the pasuk it says lezevach shlamim. But it doesn't just say imanat zayin karbani shlamim. It says the word lezevach, which means lerabais kol zevach. That if you shecht it on any day of the year, thinking for any carbon, then it'll be kosher. But if that's the case, so then I should say that kol d'shochet lahavik kamaisa, that whatever kavana you have, it should become that carbon, right? So if you're shechting a carbon Pesach and you're thinking that it should be a shlamim, it'll be a shlamim. If you shecht it thinking that it should be an ayla, it'll become an ayla. Maybe that's what the carbon is saying. The pasuk is saying. Whatever carbon you think it should be, that's what it'll become, because it's not in the right time, Pesach, Erev Pesach in the afternoon, so it becomes whatever it is. But that's not what the halacha over here is that the Braisa said. It's going to be a shlomim every day of the year. And now that it's a shlomim, whatever kavanah you have, it'll be kosher, but it'll be kosher as a shlomim. But how do you know that? Says the Gemara, the answer is because if the pasuk would say first the word that you can minat saim, which is the carbon pesach, and you bring it for shlomim, and then it would add the word vizevach, which would mean any other carbon, kidekamrit. So then, like you said, I could say that whatever you brought it for, that's the kind of carbon it becomes. Now that it says for a zevach of a shlomim, so l'chol d'shachet lei, no matter what you have in mind, you're shechting it for shlomim leheve. But it'll only actually be a shlomim. That's what the pasuk is saying. Carbon pesach brought every day of the year becomes a shlomim. Now, once it becomes a shlomim, you could have whatever kavanah you have, because it says the word lezevach there. So whatever kavanah you have, it'll be kosher. How do you know to darshan and to read the words in the pasuk this way? Maybe I should darshan the pasuk differently. We have these two words here, lezevach and then shlomim. So I should say lezevach is a klal. Lezevach is meaning that you're shechting your carbon pesach for any carbon, but then it says shlomim, which is a prat. It's spelling out that it's dafka for the shlomim. Klal or prat, ein bechlal ela masha befrat. So anytime the Torah writes a klal and then it writes a prat, what it means, the prat means it's saying individually this. And therefore, it's only going to be shlomim. Shlomim in midi achrin eloi. That only if I shecht it for a shlomim, then it's going to be a carbon shlomim. But if I shecht it for anything else, then it's going to be a puzzle. Or you can't apply the same thing that I can have kavanah for anything else, and it's going to be a shlomim. Maybe this is the way we should darshan the pasuk. Says the Gemara, no, it's not a klal prat, because it says la Hashem. After the words shlomim, it says again la Hashem, which is a klal. Hodav a kolal. It's saying La Hashem, a carbon for the Eibishter, which is a klal again. So this is actually a klal uprat, a klal. It's not just a klal uprat. Okay, the Gemara asks on this concept, Maskal of Yaakov Minar Pakoid. We had this question already before here in the Masechta, that this is not necessarily a klal uprat, a klal. Why not? Because Hole Domi, because in this case, you can't compare klala basra la klala kama. You can't compare the second klal to the first klal. Why not? Klala kama marbi Zevochim. The first klal is saying that if you shech the carbon pesach for any kind of a zevach, what's zevach? Zevach means a carbon of a behemoth, which is actually shechted. Then this the carbon pesach will be kosher. But v'suloi, we're not including anything else. However, klala basra, when it says the second klal, it says zevach, shlomim, and then it says la Hashem, that means kol de la Hashem. If you're shechting it, having in mind that it should be for any carbon that's brought for the Eibishter, and that's not only shechting. Even if you're thinking that this is being brought like a bird, that you don't shech the bird, it's done with melike. Or even a carbon like a flower offering, or mincha as well. So therefore, the second Lashem is marbe much more than the first. And by Rabbi Shmuel, they held that in such a kind of klal prat klal, where the first klal and the second klal are different, so it doesn't connect. You can't darshan it as a klal prat klal. But the Gemara answer is no. Guys, this was actually the question of Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov ben Arpakoid asked this question. But here the Gemara brings, but Hatana debate Rabbi Shmuel. But Rabbi Shmuel, they taught beklali uprati, that this kind of klal prat klal ki hai gavne. So he did darshan it. Darish ki hai gavne klal prat klal. He did darshan this kind of klal prat klal, even if the second klal is not exactly the same as the first one. So the Gemara now explains, what do we darshan from here? So I darshan from here that I compare to the prat. What's the prat? The prat is the shlomim. So ma prat mefurish shuhu shaloi l'shmoi v'kosher. The shlomim is shaloi l'shma. This is a carbon pesach, and you bring it on any day of the year, not for the pesach. You bring it for a shlomim, and it's kosher. Av kol shul l'shmoi v'kosher. So too, the klal prat klal says that for any other carbon which is similar to this, that it's not the Pesach, you bring it shaloi l'shmoi, it's also going to be kosher. That's the klal prat klal. But if you're learning this whole thing with a klal prat klal, I can tell you, ima prat mefurish dover haba ben neder ben dover. What's the prat? The prat is the shlomim. The shlomim is a kind of carbon that you could bring with a vow or as a donation. Anyone can bring it whenever he wants. So maybe I should say, Af kol haba b'neder u'b'nedava, that this halacha regarding the Pesach that's brought any day of the year, that whatever kavanah you have for it, it's going to be a shlomim. and it's going to be kosher, but that's only if your kavanah was for a kind of carbon that you could bring as a neder and a dava. What's that? Oila ushlamim in. Only a carbon oila could be brought as a neder and a dava and a shlamim as well. But chatas v'asham light. If he's bringing the carbon pesach and his kavanah is for a chatas and asham, then it should be it should not work for the carbon pesach, because it's not chatas and asham could never be brought as a neder and a dava. So Ella, so therefore the Gemara says, okay, forget it. So we can't learn this out with a klal prata klal. That doesn't work, because then we're going to be limited only to something which could be brought b'neder and dava. Ella says the Gemara, lezevach ribuyhu. That word lezevach is a ribuy. It's an extra word there in the pasuk. So therefore it adds other karbanis as well. Now this is a little bit different than what the Gemara said in the beginning. In the beginning, when the Gemara said v'emin atzayin karbanai lezevach shlamim, the Gemara didn't learn that it's a riboy. The Gemara was learning that this is the pashut pshat of the pasuk. V'emin atzayin karbana. You're bringing the tzayin of the carbon pesach. You're bringing it now every day of the year for a carbon shlamim or for another carbon, which is what zevach means. So over here, the Gemara is saying that this word zevach, it's a riboy. It's not a klal prata klal. It's an extra word which is marbe all other karbanis as well. That if you bring the pesach for them, it's going to be kosher. But now the Gemara brings back the question that it asked before. But eime the chol the shochet lei lehave kavasei. So why wouldn't I say that whatever I shechted for, it should be like that carbon? When you shecht it for the shlamim, it'll be a shlamim, and when you shecht it for any other zevach, it'll be like any other carbon. Since now over here, since we're saying that it's a riboy, so it's a separate riboy of this word zevach. So therefore, before the Gemara actually also asked the same question, and the Gemara over there answered that the pasuk, if it's only coming to say that for the shlamim, it becomes a shlamim. If you shecht it for another carbon, then it becomes another carbon. The Gemara before said, then the pasuk should have said shlamim and then afterwards zevach. But now the Gemara is saying that the word lezevach that's stuck in over here, it doesn't matter that it says it before. We don't read it together. It's not lezevach shlamim. The word zevach is an extra separate word that's a ribi for itself. If it's an extra separate word that's a ribi for itself, lezevach, kama, and then shlamim, so then why wouldn't I say that if I bring a carbon pesach for a zevach, it becomes that zevach, whatever that zevach is. If you bring it for the shlamim, it becomes like that shlamim. So the Gemara answers here in Amasvara. The Gemara says, Omer Abavin, let's just finish here the Inyan. Abavin says, Doichin kachem anechalin, eitzel kachem anechalin, when we are pushing off, meaning when we're changing the nature of this Pesach, when you shecht it every day of the year, and it becomes now a different carbon, it becomes a different carbon that's similar to it. So this carbon Pesach, that you eat it. So if it changes the rest of the year, what does it change to? It changes to become like another kachem anechalin, like another carbon that you could eat. But ve'ein doichin kachem anechalin, we're not going to say that the carbon Pesach changes so much that instead of being a Pesach that you could eat, eitzel kachem shein anechalin, that it should turn into a carbon that you can't even eat at all, which would be a carbon oila, for example. If you would say that the carbon Pesach that you shecht all year with the kavanah for a oila becomes a carbon oila, it changes the whole nature of the Pesach that you can't even eat it at all. So it can't be that it becomes an oila. Oh, but the Gemara asks, so that's only for the oila. Atu chatas v'asham mila misachli, but a carbon chatas and asham, can it not be eaten? There is a din of achila regarding the chatas and the asham. So yeah, you explained we can't change the Pesach into a oila, but why can't it change into a chatas and a asham? So Ella, the Gemara says different. Deichin kachem and achalin l'chol adam. We take the kachem of Pesach that originally it's a Pesach and it can be eaten by anybody. It's a kachem and achalim l'chol adam, and it changes to become a shlamim. A shlamim, not only could it be eaten, but anybody, the bailim, not only the kayin, but anybody eats from a shlamim. But ve'im deichin kachem and achalim l'chol adam. It's a kachem she'en achalim l'chol adam. But we're not going to change the status of this Pesach from being a carbon that could be eaten by everybody to become even a chatas or a asham, because a chatas and asham, who eats it? Only the kayanim can eat from it. So therefore we don't change it to that extent. Or a little similar, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yesi bar Abavin Amar, Rabbi Yesi bar Abavin says, Doichem kachim kalim, eitzim kachim kalim. If we're going to change the Pesach to another carbon, we're going to change it from being a Pesach, which is kachim kalim, that you could eat it anywhere in Yerushalayim, to another kachim kalim, which is a shlamim, that you could also eat it anywhere in Yerushalayim. But ve'ein doichem kachim kalim, eitzel kachim kachim. It's not going to change to go up a status to become kachim kachim. You could eat only in the azara and other halachas, and therefore a carbon Pesach brought all year remains a carbon shlamim.